What's happening, everybody? This is Jim from JCRC. What's going on? Did a little bit of work on my truck last night. Today is Monday. Last night was obviously Sunday. My last video where I actually worked on my truck, I put the 100 millimeter shocks on it, and I didn't measure anything out. And I put different shock hoops on the back, and I didn't measure anything out, and I just kind of assumed that I was going to get more travel out of it. I actually lost travel. I lost articulation. Right now, I changed everything up, and I had to bust out the tape measure and do some measuring and whatnot, and change some stuff around, obviously. But right now, I think it's pretty maxed out without actually lifting the truck up any higher. We start lifting up any higher, and it's going to it's going to start becoming extremely unstable on side hilling. I'll show you what I got right now, so a little demonstration on how high it's actually sitting. Alright, so here we go again. We're back. We're going to the side angle. There's like a solo type cup there. This mason jar that it's sitting on is roughly 5¼ inches tall. I think the mason jar is actually just a fuzzy over 5¼ I really can't get the camera to focus in on that. Just a pinch over 5¼ We'll say it's 5¼ So yeah, 5¼ inches right there. Not too shabby. It planes out on the front as well. So let me show you what happened. Alright, when I was running on this other mount right here, which is a stock front hoop, I have Glenda hoops on the front because they're longer. Alright, so I put these on here. What that did is that raised the shock up a little bit, which actually dropped that back end a little bit. And since it's a longer shock body, it took less travel for it to bottom out. This actually travels up quite a bit now. It gets way up into the fender. So nevertheless, it took a little bit, quite a bit of movement out of it. So I basically just moved those from that mount back to the factory mount, which is up here. Now I just put them back on the stock mounts, and I moved them to the furthest location, which is where I had them before. And it gets a lot of drop anyways, because I have the Z boxes on the front. You can see them right there. And so that creates a little bit of extra travel right there for the back, and I'll explain that in a minute, why that's going to balance out when it comes to the front. So yeah, nevertheless, that was a simple fix. I just moved those to the inside, and that cleared it right up. Only bummer part is now that I've got the I like the look of it. I liked having my shocks on the outside there, and now I don't have that anymore, and it kind of sucks. Now as far as that goes, I had these 80 millimeter shocks that came on the front originally. I was going to take these 80 millimeter shocks and slip them in here and bolt them up on the top like a dummy shock. See, now my hand's all in the way. Bolt them up like a dummy shock, and they worked out perfect. It was blocking the line of the other shock where it was hanging. It wasn't interfering with any kind of clearance or anything like that, and it wasn't messing with the articulation. And what I had done was I unscrewed this end, took the top off the shock, pulled the spring out of it, pushed the piston out of it, put the spring back into the cylinder, put the piston back in on top of the spring, reassembled the top of the shock tube. And what that was doing now, the spring was pushing the shock piston up into the shaft, or up into the cylinder here, and that was basically sitting flush with the bottom of the shock tube. Almost like a plug. So I mean, it does have O-rings in here, so I figured that would just kind of keep it sealed up, and it would just be a dummy tube hanging down there. But only problem is that it has a swivel mount right here on the inside, and there was no way to really get that to stop swiveling other than to either punch out that fitting that's on the inside there, if I can get the camera to focus on it. Just slide out that fitting and put a big screw and washer on it. That's probably the only way you can really get it to stay in place, but I didn't think it would look right, so I don't know. I'm on the fence about that right now. I don't know what I'm going to do about that. If I'm going to leave that in there or take it out. Right now it's just an extra support for that plastic insert that's sitting in there at the moment. I got a lock nut on the back half of that, just kind of holding that in place for the moment. Alright, so onto the front. Alright, so the front location, with the shock mounted right here where it was hanging before. Once again, longer shock tube, meant less travel when I had it sitting at the stock location. I didn't have as much upward travel, and I guess I didn't have as much downward travel either, but I'll explain that in a minute too, because the downward travel had to do with the steering connecting arm or the steering linkage. Basically what I did is I took the shock, off this top mount and let it fully extend, and where, with the axle dropped all the way down as far as the leaf springs will drop and the shock fully extended. Ideally the shock would have been, would have had to have been mounted at the top of this hoop. And the only way to really do that would be to weld something onto the bracket, onto the back half of it, to make it a little bit longer. So the only alternative is to drop the axle down farther below the leaf spring. And in a previous video I had mentioned that I had bought 2 of these RC 4-wheel drive super lift kits for the truck. So I had to put that into effect on the front axle. Out of the lift kit, I used the biggest lift block and put it on the front axle, which it didn't change the ride height because that, the Z boxes that are on the back of that thing, give it a little bit more of an extension on the back. On the front, I don't have Z boxes. I have the stock perches on the front. Where are they at? Boy. All right, so there's the stock perches right there. If you attempt to put the Z boxes on there, you can't put them on right, in the right direction, because it interferes with the transmission. If you put them on there in the reverse direction, it spreads apart your leaf springs at the back. It spreads them out farther than what it is at the front and makes everything all cattywampus, so that's no good. So I went with the stock perches on the front. Nevertheless, when I put the lift blocks on it, that gave me the axle drop that I needed, and it didn't affect the ride height in the back at all. One of the problems with the travel, like I was getting at, was this connecting arm down here. This connecting arm was, when it was sitting on the stock location, which is that first spacer right there, when it was sitting on that stock location, it was binding up and it wouldn't let it drop down that far. It was like only dropping down so far. Like when I disconnected it, I noticed that the leaf springs would actually drop down farther, or the axle would sag farther when it was disconnected. So I had to put a spacer in there and a longer screw. So I put a longer screw in here. I think that's like a 25 millimeter screw length, and then I put a 3 millimeter spacer on top of the stock spacer, and then a lock nut on the back half, and then I gained all my articulation on the front. When it's fully compressed, it looks like this connecting arm is hitting the motor. It's really, really tight, but it's not actually hitting. I'll show you that. Alright, so there it is in the front. Actually, they're just showing the front view of it real quick. It looks like my back tire is sitting up in the air just a pinch, and it is, but that's just because of the way the truck's balanced out right at the moment. Nevertheless, and plus I have stiffer springs in the front shocks because the front end is heavier. I do have a spring kit for the shocks, and I put stiffer ones in the front than I did on the back, just because, once again, all the running gear on the front. So yeah, fully compressed, piece of plastic jammed in between these two, and it is tight. You can move the plastic back and forth, but it is a tight fit. It looks pretty damn close in there, but it's not hitting. Yeah, once again, 2 reasons. One, for putting that thing up the way it is, and when I initially built the truck, I mounted the servo underneath this main cross arm here. Like, it's supposed to be mounted on top of the servo mount, or the servo is supposed to be sitting on top of that cross member, and I have it mounted underneath, so it's bolted up from underneath, and that lowered my servo down, which gave me more clearance in the beginning when I first rotated my motor. So 2 little modifications there. If you might have to drop your servo down underneath if you want this kind of clearance. So yeah, front view. Now I'm gonna mention one other thing too, for anybody who's building a TF2 and they get the body lift kit, like the stock RC 4-wheel drive body lift kit. I don't know if it lifts the body up quite as high as mine is sitting. Like mine right now, I had mentioned before that I didn't have to trim my fenders. Everything is super close down there. That's fully bottomed out. Like I said, it's really close down there. But I didn't have to trim anything. And that's because I made my own body mounts. And like I said, these are made out of plastic. It was from a pond pump filter for like a little fish pond, outdoor pond. And they have that little plastic cover on the filter. And I cut 2 strips out of that plastic cover. They're roughly 2/16 of an inch thick, 3.5 inches wide. I think 1 1/4 inches high. and I think it's 3/4 of an inch from center to center on these screw holes. You know, and I got these two screw holes, or two screws going into the stock body mounts, and then I got two short screws coming back out, you know, where the body is actually clipped down over top of. You know, that you have to pull apart to put that on. So nevertheless, I think my body mounts sit up a little bit higher than the factory body lift or whatever. If you order a body lift for the truck, just keep that in mind. You might actually have to make a set of mounts. And on the front end, in some of my videos, you'll notice that you'll hear like a clicking sound, and it almost sounds like the tires are rubbing on the body, but that's not what's happening. What's happening is that these, when I have the wheels turned all the way, the outer lugs on these mudslingers are actually grabbing on my leaf spring, and you'll hear it like clicking away on my leaf spring. So that's got to do with back spacing on my wheels. I have to go to the hobby store today, this morning. I should be there right now. They actually opened up at 10 o'clock, my local hobby store. That's Namkin Hobby and 9 Mile and M5 in Farmington Hills, Michigan. So I'm going to run up there and I'm going to get some longer screws for the leaf springs, and just some longer screws in general. I've got 3 little screw packet bags here that I want to get, you know, like 8 of each on. Ultimately, there's some 25 millimeter screws here, and I only have 2 of them. I'd like to have like 8 of these just for the leaf spring, you know, deal, if I want to put more lift blocks on it. And I think these are some 22 millimeter ones. I want to get like 8 of those as well. But yeah, there she is all together. A lot of clearance there. Can't believe that. A lot of articulation. And one more time, just for shits and giggles, there's a view of the back of it. That's pretty darn good for a trail finder. So yeah, anyway, when I go to the hobby store today, like I said, I'm going to check out some wheels, see if I can find some wheels with different back spacing in them. Hopefully some metal wheels. These are plastic. So maybe just move them out a pinch to clear up that little issue with my tires grabbing on the leaf springs, and at the same time it'll probably widen up the platform just a pinch and give me a little bit more stability. But that's about it, everybody. That is my nightly accomplishment on the TF2, and I'm pretty impressed with the articulation out of it. And then again, another shot from the side. I'm sorry. I know it's gratuitous. I just had to do it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Click like and subscribe if you liked what you've seen. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. I'll help you out as best I can. I'm more than happy to walk you through whatever I had to do to get it to where it's at right now. So yeah, thanks again for watching. Click like and subscribe. Share with your friends. Y'all have a great day.